seminary. This is my spring semester in seminary. I just started last week, and it was a bit of a freak-out moment for me. I reached out to Deb because I'm taking Greek, and Deb's husband knows Greek, and I said, I'm panicked here, Deb, with this Greek, because it's Greek to me. Get it? It's always there's always an overwhelming feeling the first week of the semester, but especially in this one. But I'm already feeling better. Don't worry if you're a little nervous. I'm already feeling better because I'm realizing, okay, I just have one class, so I can handle it, and the Lord will show me the way as this goes. In the fall, though, I didn't feel that same way. I signed up for 2 classes, and the first month I felt okay. I was a little bit nervous, and as I got into October, I started to freak out. Because I am a 3/4 time pastor here at Cornerstone. If you don't know what that means, it means I'm not full-time. I'm just under full-time. And so I thought, well, I can take 2 classes and be 3/4 time pastor. And I found out very quickly that wasn't a very good mix. And I started to freak out and say, Lord, I don't know how I'm going to balance all these things in my life. I don't know how I'm going to learn in the classroom and be faithful to my family and fulfill all the demands of my time for the ministry that you've blessed me with and that we're partnering with together here. So how am I going to do this? And the worst part about it was not just trying to find the balance, because I made it work. I got up early and stayed up a little later than normal and had a little less fun than maybe I'd like to. But the worst part was the loss of clarity that happens when you have so much on your plate. When I'd sit down to pray, sometimes my mind was so flooded with all the different things that were going on. Things for the church, or homework that I needed to do later in the day, or things that were going on for our family. And it was just really hard to connect with the Lord. And that's when I would start to panic and say, this isn't good. I can't continue to live like this. And I know I can't live like this because I've lived without the Lord before, and it's not good. I feel blessed to have had that experience because alarm bells started going off in my mind, and then I started saying, well, what can I do? It's partway through the semester, so what can I do? Now I can't just stop all these things that I want to stop doing. I can't just switch to one class now. I have to get through. I'm in for the long haul here. So I leaned into the Lord as much as I possibly could, and I made adjustments to my life. But I was desperately seeking clarity in my relationship with the Lord. I desperately wanted to see clearly who I am now, every moment, and who God is, and what God is asking me to do. Can you relate, though, at all? Is there anybody in here who's not really busy in their life? Maybe if you're retired, maybe you're not quite as busy as you once were, although I hear it gets worse when you retire. You're actually more busy. But isn't it hard to balance all the things in life? Isn't it hard then when you're trying to balance all these things to actually make time for the Lord? And when you do make time for the Lord, to really fully give your heart and soul to God and really listen and be present? Because so much of praying is not just telling God what we want, but listening and paying attention to the subtle things in our body and in our heart and mind that are going on there. And if we're not able to do that, we don't have clarity. We are not able to clearly see who God is and understand who we are in relation to God and what's going on in the world around us. And we can easily move into despair and just trying to keep up with what is on our plate. And unfortunately, for all of us, God sort of takes a back seat. Maybe not like in our agenda or how we do things, but in our heart and in our desires. So Lent is this time of reorienting our life towards God. Does everybody know that? Lent is more than just a time of the weeks leading up to Easter where we think, oh yes, I'm excited for Easter. We get to have a good meal. Maybe it's going to be warmer out. I mean, those are all things to look forward to, right? But Lent is supposed to be this most serious time of self-examination and looking inwardly and saying, what are the things inside of me that are interfering between my relationship with the Lord? What are those things that are distorting my clarity and making it hard for me to see the realities of who God is and the realities of who I am in relation to God, and to fully and clearly be able to understand all these things that are happening around me? And let's be honest, it's getting harder to do that, isn't it? But the answer is not on social media or on the news or in anything that we read. The answer comes from the Lord. Because only the Lord can bring us the clarity that we desire and the clarity that we long for. The understanding of who we are and what's going on in this world. And that's what Lent is all about. As part of our rich tradition, our rich history as Christians, it goes all the way back. The earliest Christians would take this time of Lent very seriously. Easter was the biggest deal of all, even bigger than Christmas, because Easter celebrates the resurrection, and if the resurrection didn't happen, then the Christian faith falls apart. Because if Christ didn't defeat sin and death, then what difference is he from a prophet or any other teacher that was there? Jesus claimed to be the Son of God, so if the resurrection didn't happen, then what are we even doing here? Honestly, I can't see a point. There are some who believe that still today, and I don't see the reason for worshiping Christ then. I would say, well, maybe we can borrow some of his teaching, but if he's not the Son of God, if he didn't defeat sin and death, then what's the point? So the earliest Christians used this time of Lent as a preparation to really, truly celebrate Easter. He said, this is a huge deal. This is why we give our life for Christ. This is why we devote everything for Christ, because he is the Son of God. And he defeated sin and death, and now we have that power living inside of us. It's a miracle. They took this so seriously that if you wanted to be baptized, you had to take this entire portion of Lent to learn about what it is that you were committing your life to. And then they baptized everyone on Easter. Can you imagine that? It'd be pretty neat to do that in a year. Say, everybody needs to wait for Easter, and then we just have nothing but baptisms all day long. But do you get what I'm saying here about the seriousness of Lent? And unfortunately, I think sometimes we just look at it as a preparation time for Easter, sure. Or maybe it's a time to give something up. But it's so much more than that. It's so much more than that. We're supposed to gain some clarity about who we are and our level of devotion to Christ. Because if we were anything like the earliest Christians, we would understand that this is to actually risk our well-being, to serve and worship Jesus. That this is more than just a social aspect of our lives, that this is our very life. This is our identity. This is everything of who we are is given to Christ. So in this time of Lent, we examine, well, what is it that's getting in the way of that? Am I actually able to give my whole self to Christ? Are my priorities lined up in such a way where I enable that to happen? David has this kind of clarity. This is why I chose this psalm today. If you read this psalm of David, David knows exactly who God is. David knows exactly who he is. And he knows the temptations and he calls them the snares of life. He understands very clearly that life is full of things that can catch us up, that can keep us from being close to the Lord. And David so desperately wants to be close to the Lord. And what I love about David is he's a real person. He's not like a superhero of the Bible. He's not someone who's without sin. He's even different than Paul. You know, Paul was terrible before he became a follower of Christ, before he became a disciple, but then he's sort of looked at as like a superhero. Like, well, then he's just writing all these letters and being really amazing. But David wavered in his faith. He did things that he didn't want to do, and he fell short, and he was tempted and then fell into sin time and time again. And here David is acknowledging that it's the Lord who can keep him from sinning. He says, my eyes are ever fixed on the Lord. My eyes are ever fixed on the Lord, because only the Lord can release me from the snare. Now, the snare he's talking about is like a net. It's like something that, like they would use to catch birds or whatever. But it's a metaphor, right? It's a metaphor for temptation, and temptation leads us to sin. It does. When we act on a temptation, we sin, and we sometimes think, unfortunately, that that's okay. I mean, I'm saying that it was a sin, it's not that big a deal. But this is the reality, is that if we're living with sin in our life and we don't try to address it, if we don't try to remove it from our life and shine the light of Christ onto it, it changes us. Sin doesn't just leave us where we're at. It changes us. It distorts everything that we see. It keeps us from seeing clearly, this clarity that we're talking about. It muddies the water of everything that we see. It changes how we see God. We can't see God clearly if there's sin in our life. We can't draw close to God. We can't see and understand ourselves clearly if there's sin in our life. And we certainly can't understand each other. So David is saying, my eyes are on the Lord. Even though there's temptation all around me, my eyes are on the Lord because only He can release me from these snares. Isn't that the kind of clarity that you want in your life? Isn't that what we seek when we look all over for the answers of the life that we're living, of why things are the way they are, especially when we have weeks like we just had? The answer doesn't come from humanity. The answer doesn't come from the things that we're already doing. The answer, my friends, comes from the Lord. So how do we get to that place? How does David have this kind of clarity? And how do we achieve that? How do we work towards that? I think the answer is found in this fourth commandment, the Sabbath. God says we need to rest. We need to take time to rest, because if we don't rest, we're so overwhelmed with all these things that are going on in our life. And we can't see clearly. We don't take enough time to just settle down a little bit. And we never give our minds a break. I mean, just think about it for a second in your own life. How often do you just sit and just think? Or sit in prayer? Or sit in silence? Not very often. It's difficult. It's difficult. Did you know that this is the fourth commandment? I hope that by now you know this. I'd like to read it to you. This comes from Exodus chapter 20. First commandment, you shall have no other gods before me. Okay? Second, you shall not make for yourself an image. In other words, an idol. We have all sorts of idols in today's world. Third, you shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. Okay, these are all about God. And not placing anything else before God. Fourth, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Now, why would God put this one forth? Why would this be of such importance? And why does this one get so overlooked? We're not good at resting, are we? I'm not good at resting. It's hard. We're not good at making space for the Lord, are we? And there's a reason why God put this one forth, because He knows that we're going to have a tendency to overwork. He says, honor the Sabbath day and keep it holy. And you can read more about that if you'd like. He says, because this is what God did. God rested. It's only during Sabbath that we can really clearly see ourselves. That the dust settles in our lives. So that we can gain some clarity. So that we can not only see God working in our lives and what God has done in the past, but then we can feel God. We can feel God's presence in our heart. The reason I will panic from being overworked is because I can't feel God anymore. Because I'm thinking too much about all these things that need to get done. Or I'm too much on my phone. Saying, look at what everybody else is doing. That doesn't connect me with God. And working, even doing homework, even preparing a message does not connect me with God. Sitting in God's presence connects me with God. The reason I want to talk about Sabbath is because I think Lent is hard to really embrace if we don't make space for this. If we don't make space for an examination of our heart and our desires, our priorities, then how can we actually benefit from this time of Lent? If we just continue to go through the rhythms of our life that are centered around whatever it is that you center your rhythms of life around. Maybe it's your family, maybe it's success, maybe it's money, maybe it's entertainment. I don't want to make any presumptions about that. But I'll tell you, it's really hard to center the rhythms of our life around the Holy Spirit of God. But this is how we gain clarity in our lives by carving out some time to sit in God's presence and to discern what it is that God is saying. But it has to be intentional. Now, I realize that to go from not having a Sabbath day to all of a sudden having a Sabbath day, where, if you take the Sabbath seriously, you're not supposed to do any work. When's the last time we had a day like that? Where you didn't do any work? Maybe where you unplugged from technology and you just tried to see what the Lord is doing in your life and fully enjoy the blessings that you have. An example of that for you that I do is I try, every morning I get up with Peyton and feed her breakfast, and I used to maybe check my phone a little bit. Now I leave the phone in the other room to say, this is a blessing from God, and so this actual experience can connect me with God if my mind is there. If I'm saying, Lord, thank you for this moment. What do you have for me this day? Rather than thinking about, okay, then I gotta call Sarah, and then I gotta talk to Adam. Okay, then I gotta work on my sermon, right? Yeah. You see what I'm saying? But we need to take the time to focus our hearts and minds on God. That's how we get this kind of clarity, and that's what Lent is all about. So actually, for the rest of Lent, I'd like to work us through this concept of Sabbath. Each week, talking about a little bit different aspect of it, and what I want to give you is some practical tips. Because I realize that you may not be able to take an entire day. Maybe you have sports on Saturdays and Sundays, and I get that. And that's just the world we live in now. Some of you I know remember a time when Sunday was just a day for going to worship, right? Marianne is nodding already. Just worship. Maybe you go and have lunch or dinner with friends, right? And you celebrate the blessings of the Lord. But now there's all sorts of things on Sunday. And that's not going to change. I get that. But can we take some small steps of Sabbath? There's such a thing as Sabbath time, where we just carve out little niches of our day that can remind us of God's presence and God's blessings in our life. We have to be intentional about that. How else can we receive the grace of God? We're carving out space in our heart to receive the grace that God wants to give us. It's pretty full in there right now. So what can we move to the side? So, practical tip for this week. When your phone goes off, either a text or a reminder or it rings, instead of, well, this is how when my phone goes off, maybe you're like me, I hear it in the other room and it's just like I'm trained. It's like I'm Pavlov's dog or something, I'm thinking like, oh, I gotta get it. I gotta go get the phone. Instead of thinking about the stress or who is it or whatever, use it as a reminder to wake up to the blessings of God. As a reminder to say, instead of that's something I have to do, that this is the reality that God is first in my heart. It's like an alarm, but for your conscience, for your soul. And if that doesn't work for you, I would just say, try this tip. Put your phone in the other room and don't even think about it. And just try and be fully present, even just, for an hour or something. It's surprising how hard it is. But friends, Lent is about restructuring our lives, our desires, our priorities, all those things that are happening within us, so that we can fully celebrate the resurrection. So that whatever things within us need to die, so that we can be more closely united with Christ, so that we can actually live as disciples, real disciples. Then, when we identify those things and allow those things to die at Easter, then we can really celebrate the resurrection. Then we can really claim Jesus as our Lord and Savior. So friends, I pray that you would be able to do that. I pray that you would have the courage to look inwardly, that you would have the patience to sit quietly, that you would have the faith and trust that David has. With faith to know that whatever Jesus reveals in your heart, that He'll give you the power to remove it. Amen.